In its prime, Victoria's Secret was sold to the media as a fantasy, something only certain women could attain. However, in the era of body positivity, Victoria's Secret struggled to find its footing in catering to the cultural changing landscape. The brand was deemed outdated, distasteful, and did not have a place for modern day culture. Thus, Victoria's Secret was forced to remarket themselves. So, after a 6-year hiatus, the Victoria's Secret fashion show made its reappearance. However, a notable element of the Victoria's Secret fashion show was missing: the actual runway show. In 2023, Victoria's Secret shied away from doing its iconic runway show and instead opted for a documentary. The Victoria's Secret runway show was a huge staple in their history, so by axing the concept of the runway show, Victoria's Secret forgot its roots. Rebranding the Victoria's Secret fashion show into a documentary would never work on a brand like Victoria's Secret simply because a lot of its fan base has an emotional attachment to the runway show. After all, the Victoria's Secret runway show was the creme de la creme of its branding. With this new format came some critiques. First and foremost, people wanted to see diversity implemented in the shows, not a completely different revamp of the show. They didn't have to sacrifice the fun, quirky theatrics that came with the event. After all, these were highly anticipated things that many looked forward to seeing. For them to all of a sudden switch up on their image, they lost focus of who they wanted to market to, and in the process lost the trust of many. Please all and you will please none. If you try to satisfy everyone, you will end up satisfying no one. They were attempting to cater to those who weren't their consumer base to begin with. By abandoning its core aesthetic, it didn't feel authentic, but rather a generic approach at attempting to get with the times. The outfits weren't the most flattering on the models, the wings were not the iconic angel wings they once were, and overall, the documentary was not the format that fans desired. It's almost as if, because they incorporated inclusivity, they thought they had to make it a political statement for audience to accept this rebrand. But not everything that includes minorities has to be this big political statement. We just want to exist. With this rebrand, it didn't feel like Victoria's Secret was truly listening to the fans' past criticisms, but rather tried to go the performative route in hopes they could please the masses. They thought if they sprinkled in different body types, trans and BIPOC models, that everyone would go, "Slay girl boss queen, eat the house down." However, diversity on its own is not enough for marketability. Let me make myself very clear. When I say this, I don't mean that brands shouldn't be inclusive or shouldn't incorporate minorities in their marketing or campaigns. Having a diverse group of models is crucial for the brand to make a comeback, and is just undeniably essential in this society. What I mean to say is, it's simply not enough to say, "We support all women." Actions speak louder than words. You can't fake authenticity. Audiences are getting smarter and can scope out if you're doing something for the sake of obtaining a large audience, as opposed to doing something from a place of genuinity. Because Victoria's Secret was so polarizing, it's easy to see right through its attempt at wanting to hop in on the inclusivity trend. For instance, are we going to pretend to forget about the time when Ed Razik, the chief marketing officer at Victoria's Secret, claimed transsexual models should not be cast because the show is a fantasy, and then quit right after the brand hired its first trans model? Or when he said, plus-size models don't fit the Victoria's Secret mold and audiences don't have any interest in seeing them? All this did was reaffirm that the brand was disconnected from reality. They were trying to pander to everyone, and well, turns out everyone just didn't buy into it. In October 2024, they decided to bring the show back to the runway. If I'm gonna be honest, I'm surprised no one has really talked about the show coming back on social media. And maybe it's just my algorithm, but there wasn't really any rollout marketing to advertise its comeback. And the timing in itself was a bit peculiar. Its release usually coincides with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade during the holidays when people are purchasing gifts, taking advantage of the holiday deals. But regardless, they released the show in October, and there were some opinions to be had. Those with nostalgic ties critiqued that the runway show lacked the magic that past shows did. For instance, there wasn't a cohesive theme, some girls were struggling to walk, the costumes weren't as glamorous as the audience expected it to be, some of the wings weren't wings. The attention to detail regarding the lights and camera were lacking, and the production and set design just wasn't there. A lot of people mentioned the lack of color was hard to ignore, which since the pandemic, many have been trying to steer away from minimalist color palettes. It reminds me of when people say restaurants that used to have so much vibrancy now look soulless and lackluster. Apparently, the budget for production was limited for the Victoria's Secret fashion show, but there are many fashion designers that can make magic happen on a tight budget. I mean, on Project Runway and RuPaul's Drag Race, they make clothes out of literal trash. There were complaints about including plus-size models or trans models being the fault of the decline of the fashion show. However, inclusivity does not mean you have to sacrifice creativity. Just because you include a variety of different body types does not mean you can't deliver an impactful performance. Savage X Fenty is a great example of being modern, trendy, and still being able to incorporate diversity in their shows. Some have argued Victoria's Secret was a fantasy. Not everyone has to be represented. Or, I'm plus size and I don't care about being seen. Some people believe that Victoria's Secret was a fantasy and that only some people should have the privilege to obtain to be able to walk in these shows, and that not everyone has to be included because that's what keeps the magic alive for the brand. If you don't care about being represented or feeling seen, that is your prerogative. However, to say that we should gatekeep certain body types from partaking in the show is not only fat-phobic, but also completely out of touch with reality. Are we going to forget how toxic of an environment that was prevalent in these spaces? As magical of a fantasy as these shows may appear, they are notorious for their problematic practices that require models to even have a chance to walk in these shows. Past angels have spoken out about how negative of an impact trying to meet the impossible standards of being a VS angel had on their physical and mental health. Many endured EDs, body dysmorphia, and trauma by trying to attain unrealistic beauty standards. All that glitters is not gold. It doesn't work in this society anymore to gatekeep those opportunities from people who are deserving of a seat at the table. The quality of the clothing for Victoria's Secret is also simply not what it used to be. The sizing is inaccurate, some of the clothing is ill-fitting, and there have been reports of uneven hems and the seams coming undone. I talk more about this in my outfit repeater video as well as clothing sucks. It might be safe to say that it was fun while it lasted. Even if they incorporated the bombshell blowouts, the Victoria's Secret fashion show in its glory days is something that just can't be replicated. The original was an original for a reason. That could be said for just about anything. You need to remember that the Victoria's Secret fashion show was something new. The first time audience witnessed it, it was innovative. The fantasy was something of its time, something everyone had their eyes on. The budget was there, the charisma was there, the blowouts were there. But no amount of production value can bring that magic back. Victoria's Secret will never be the same, but that's okay. It's really difficult to make a brand like Victoria's Secret timeless. Brands evolve and they change. Regardless of its popularity in the past, Victoria's Secret ran its course, and it's no secret that it's no longer the groundbreaking brand that it used to be in its former days. Victoria's Secret rebranding saga serves as yet another reminder for marketers that it's important and even necessary to adapt to cultural shifts. But without authenticity, thoughtful timing, and a keen understanding of your core audience, your efforts might go to waste.